All right, everyone, get ready. We're about to take a deep dive into something, well, you probably use it every single day.
Every day.
Microsoft Windows.
Oh, no, I know.
You're probably thinking, Windows, what's so exciting about that?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But trust me on this.
Yeah.
The story of how this little piece of software became like this global phenomenon, it's actually pretty wild.
Oh, yeah. It's a crazy story. It's full of, competition.
Well, tons of competition.
Innovation.
Yeah.
And definitely some head-scratching moments.
We're going to get to those, don't you worry. especially that whole Windows E thing.
Oh, we can't forget about Windows Me.
But let's rewind a bit first, like way back before Windows, before we even had things like icons and a mouse.
Right.
What was that like?
It was a different world. Imagine you've got your computer, right? But there's no icons, no fancy windows you can move around. It's just you and a black screen.
Oh my gosh.
With a blinking cursor.
Like a scary movie.
And you have to type out commands for everything. No clicking, no dragging, just pure code.
That sounds terrifying. Like something out of war games, you know?
It's true, and definitely not very user-friendly for the average person. But then along comes this revolution, the graphical user interface, or GUI, and bam, you have icons, windows to move around. You could even use a mouse.
A mouse.
Yeah, it was a game changer.
Revolutionary.
It really was, and that's where Windows decided to make its big entrance.
Windows, our knight in shining armor, here to rescue us from the evil command prompts. But it's funny because the name Windows, it didn't come from some big marketing scheme.
No.
Our source says it actually came about because it was one of the first systems to use, well, those little graphical boxes to represent programs, which now we just call Windows.
It's true. Windows 1.0, way back in 1985, it was a bold step into this whole world of GUIs.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an instant hit, you know? I mean, it had some limitations. It was more like a shell, a graphical shell, running on top of that old MS-DOS system.
DOS.
But more importantly, it caught the eye of a certain tech giant who was already making waves with their own GUI, Apple.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Here comes the drama.
Here it comes.
Apple versus Microsoft.
That's right.
Round one.
Apple, well, they weren't too happy. They sued Microsoft, claiming that Windows basically copied their Macintosh, with the whole overlapping Windows thing.
They love a good lawsuit.
They do. But this was a big deal. This wasn't just about some code or some design. It was about, the future of personal computing.
High stakes.
Exactly. Who would control this brave new world of graphical interfaces?
So who won?
Well, in the end, Microsoft, they came out on top.
Oh, okay.
But that lawsuit, it set the stage for, decades of rivalry between these two companies.
Yeah, they're still at it.
Oh, absolutely. But more importantly, it showed everyone just how important this whole graphical computing thing was becoming.
So while Windows was, battling out in court with Apple, they were also trying to win over actual users. Right?
Of course. Always.
What was the turning point? When did things really start to take off?
I'd say Windows 3.0. Which came out in 1990. This wasn't just a little upgrade, This was a major leap.
A big one.
A huge one. We're talking about innovations like, okay, get this, virtual memory.
Virtual memory?
Yeah.
Is that like fake memory?
Kind of. It basically tricked programs into thinking that the computer had way more memory than it actually did.
Oh, clever.
And then there were these things called loadable device drivers.
What are those?
Well, before that, if you wanted to use something like a new printer or a scanner, forget it.
It was a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. You needed all these special cards, software. It was a mess.
Oh, my goodness.
But these loadable device drivers, they meant that Windows could just, adapt to new hardware.
So much easier.
It was revolutionary.
I can just imagine. I bet some people are listening, they're like, wait, but I remember installing Windows 3.0.
Yeah.
And it came on like a stack of floppy disks.
Oh, yeah. The floppy disks.
The clicking, the whirring, the endless disk swapping. I can practically smell that nostalgia.
It's a stark contrast, right, to today's world. Instant downloads, these massive hard drives.
Everything's instant now.
But back then, those floppy disks, that was cutting edge. And it worked.
It worked.
Windows 3.0 was a bona fide hit. Put Microsoft on the map, a major player in the computer world.
And then came the moment that changed everything.
Windows 95.
Windows 95.
I still remember it.
I mean, was there anyone on the planet who wasn't talking about Windows 95?
I don't think so.
It was like the release of a Beatles album.
It really did capture the world's attention. I mean, for good reason. Windows 95, it wasn't just some upgrade. It was a total overhaul.
It was huge.
And suddenly, boom, we had the start menu.
Oh, the start menu.
The taskbar.
Don't forget my computer.
My computer. Things that we just take for granted now, but back then, revolutionary.
Totally. And that sound, that iconic startup sound.
Oh, yeah.
The sound of the future, But seriously, Windows 95, it really brought personal computing to the masses.
It did.
User-friendly, tons of new features.
Sleek.
And that marketing campaign, genius, pure genius.
Marketing goal. But underneath all that, all the hype, Windows 95, it actually marked a big, technical shift for Microsoft.
Oh, really?
Remember we were talking about Windows NT, that other line they were developing kind of in the background?
Right. The more kind of stable one.
Yeah.
Aimed at businesses.
Exactly. Well, with Windows 95, they started, the long process of trying to merge those two lines.
Emphasis.
The goal was to eventually have, just one Windows, one architecture. And it had to be everything. User-friendly, but also rock solid.
So did it work?
Well, it was a process. Let's just say there were some bumps in the road.
I'm sensing a but coming.
A few.
I'm guessing Windows ME was one of those bumps.
Let's just say that Windows ME, it taught Microsoft some valuable lessons.
Like what?
About really thoroughly testing things. And maybe, not rushing a product to market.
Yeah. I think we've all learned that the hard way at some point. But speaking of learning, let's talk about the line that, kind of saved the day. Windows NT.
Ah, yes. N2.
This was the serious one.
Yeah.
The operating system built for businesses, power users, the people who needed, absolute stability, security. Where did that come from?
It's a really interesting story, actually. Windows NT, it was like this side project from Microsoft.
Really?
Developed by a team of engineers, super smart guys, who had actually worked on, get this, the OS/2 operating system back at IBM.
Oh, wow. IBM.
And they brought all this experience. They knew how to build these robust, secure operating systems. And Microsoft, they kind of gave them a lot of freedom.
To just, experiment.
Yeah, to innovate.
That's cool. So while the 9X versions were all about, making things fun for us regular folks at home, NT was out there, holding down the fort in the business world.
Exactly. And over time, Microsoft, they realized something.
What's that?
That the future of Windows, it wasn't just about one or the other.
It was both.
It had to be both. They needed to combine, that user-friendliness of the 9X line with the stability and the security of NT.
The best of both worlds.
Exactly.
And that brings us to, maybe one of the most famous versions of Windows ever. Windows XP.
Ah, Windows XP. A classic.
I still know people who, refused to use anything else.
It was a landmark achievement. They really did it. They took everything great about both lines, packaged it all up in this sleek, modern interface.
I love that look.
It was great. It was stable. It was faster, for its time.
Way faster.
And it just worked.
It just worked. I remember that's what everyone said. And it had that new look.
Right.
With the green start button and the blue taskbar.
I remember.
It felt, I don't know, fresh.
It did. It felt new. It felt like the future.
And it had all those cool new features
Improved multimedia support, better networking. Oh, and clear type font smoothing, which it seems like a small thing now. But back then, if you had an LCD screen, oh my gosh, it made text so much easier to read.
It's those little things,
They really do make or break the experience.
Exactly. It's no wonder people held on to XP for dear life.
They did not want to let it go.
Even when the newer versions came out.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, why mess with perfection, right?
It's true. Windows XP, for a lot of people, it was the computer. They didn't know anything else.
They were one and the same.
So trying to transition them away, it was a challenge for Microsoft, believe me.
I bet. So how did they eventually get people to move on?
It took time. Baby steps. First came Windows Vista.
Vista. The one that everyone, let's just say it had a bit of a rocky start.
Yeah, a few bumps in the road, but, it had some good ideas, I'll give it that. Security was a big focus.
Oh, yeah, user account control. Or UAC, as we all, lovingly call it. I remember those constant pop-up messages are you sure? Did you really mean to do that? Just for moving a file. It was Windows was questioning my every move.
It was a little much, maybe, but you got to remember, back then, malware, it was becoming a huge problem. And Vista, it was trying to get ahead of it, be proactive.
So good intentions, just maybe not the best execution.
Something like that. Plus, it had, some performance issues, compatibility headaches. Not exactly a smooth transition.
It wasn't. But hey, at least it paved the way for Windows 7. Now, that was a good one.
Oh, Windows 7. Like Vista's cooler, more reliable, older. A sibling kept a lot of the good stuff from Vista, like the security improvements. But it just worked.
And it had Arrow Peak, those little taskbar previews. I miss those.
It's those little things. They make a difference.
I really do. Okay, so Windows 7 was a hit. Stable, reliable, felt like, Windows was back on track. But then
came the touch screens.
And Windows 8. Oh, boy. Here we go. This is where things get interesting. Microsoft, they really rolled the dice with this one, trying to, bridge the gap between the desktops and the whole tablet world.
It was a different time.
It was. Everyone had iPad fever. But that's the start menu? Why get rid of the start menu?
It was a bold move. Remember back then, it was all about the iPad, Android tablets. Microsoft, they wanted to be in that game. Create an operating system for both worlds.
I get it. I do.
Yeah.
But those live tiles, I don't know, they just felt wrong. It was like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole,
The learning curve was steep, that's for sure. A lot of people, they just wanted their familiar desktop back.
And to Microsoft's credit, they listened.
They did.
Windows 8.1, the update that was basically just bring back the start menu.
A step in the right direction.
It was. Though I think by then some of the damage was done. A lot of people had moved on.
I think you're right.
Which brings us to, well, arguably, one of Microsoft's most successful releases.
Which one?
Windows 10.
Windows 10.
The one to rule them all.
It really was all about balance, They kept some of those touch-friendly features from Windows 8, but they brought back the desktop.
The desktop, everyone was so happy.
It was a smart move.
And they made it a rolling release. So it's like always getting updated, always improving. Windows 10, the gift that keeps on giving.
That's one way to put it. But it's been a really clever strategy for them. It keeps users engaged, right?
Totally.
And it makes it way harder for the competition to keep up.
Speaking of keeping up, along comes Windows 11, the sleek new design, that controversial centered start menu.
People had opinions about that one.
Oh, yeah. Strong opinions. But underneath it all, it was still, Windows 10 at its core.
Familiar, but with a fresh coat of paint.
Exactly. But now things are getting really wild because, well, there's Windows 365.
Windows in the cloud.
What does that even mean? Cloud-based Windows. Sounds like something straight out of, a sci-fi movie.
Right. It's pretty wild. Basically, you're not actually running Windows on your computer anymore. It's all happening on Microsoft servers. You're just accessing a virtual version of it.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, I could be, on my iPad, right? And I fire up Windows 365, and boom, I'm in Windows.
That's the idea.
Right.
That's insane.
It's still early days, But it makes you wonder, what does this mean for the future of Windows? Of all operating systems, are we all just headed to the cloud?
That's a big question to end on.
It is.
From those humble beginnings with that blinking cursor to a future in the cloud, it's been quite a journey for Microsoft Windows. Who knows what's next? Maybe we'll be controlling our computers with our minds. But until then, we'll keep clicking and dragging and exploring the ever-evolving world of Windows. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.